Welcome back to another episode of BHAW Radio. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and this is episode 116. Logan's co-hosting tonight. We got a special one. We got Coach Jeff Breese on the line. Welcome to the show, Coach Breese.
What's up, guys? Awesome to be here.
Awesome to have you. Yeah. For the listeners out there, this is long overdue. I think maybe a year or even 2 years ago, I was like, Coach Breeze, we got to get you on the show. And it's all my fault. But Coach Breeze is entering his fourth year at West Point. He is the director of wrestling development and wears about 17 hats. So, thanks for coming on. This is long overdue. I'm really excited for this episode because it's a lot of the nitty gritty of West Point. That a lot of people, some may know about, a good bit if it's parents, and alumni listening to, but people that maybe outside the program that are just friends probably don't know like the nitty gritty that you do. So
Well,
appreciate
hopefully it's not boring. I do spend a lot of time in Excel spreadsheets and like saying the word logistics, so hopefully it's not boring.
it. Logan, how you doing
Oh,
tonight?
I'm great, man. I'm coming to you from my wife's office at our house, trying to get things set up here. We're like what I don't know, 5 months into being moved in here, and we're like still trying to get things situated. So that's the way it goes. But
5 months is like 2 days. Like you're good.
yeah, I mean, we're like boxes have at least moved to the basement, except for one that's hanging out in our room that we can't get rid of. We'll get there. Um, but other than that, everything's good, man. The weather's starting to turn a little bit, it's starting to feel like wrestling season, so that's exciting. And man, Coach, excited to talk to you. I don't think I've ever, officially got to meet you or interact with you at all, but man, excited to talk to you. I hear nothing but great things about you. To get to talk to you, kind of learn a little bit more about what you do, and where you see the program. So excited.
Awesome. I'll see if I'll do my best to explain it.
Well,
That's all you can ask for.
let's
Yeah.
start with some current events, because I think a lot of people know, hey, you're the director of wrestling development. You deal with a lot of logistics and Excel spreadsheets, as you say, but busy couple of weeks the program's had. A couple weeks ago, I think you guys had a record number of recruits on post, and then last weekend with the golf outing. Talk to us about, kind of some of those things and some of the work that goes into like the planning, execution of, events like that for West Point.
Yeah, so I mean, I can probably talk the most about the recruiting. Colonel Messick crushes the golf outing, and I just kind of have a to-do list from Todd. So like that one's I take zero credit in that going well. I just show up and do what I'm told to do. The recruiting side of things is it's simple, but it's a lot, right? There's only a certain number of people on the staff that can have contact and can do things with the recruits. So even though we're in this giant place that is West Point, and we probably have 100 people that would happily help us do stuff on a recruiting visit, it has to be the 5 or 6 coaches that are on staff, and it's boring stuff like booking flights and figuring out the logistics of how to get 5 kids to fly in at the same time so you can pick them up, to man, what are we going to do so they can have some fun and enjoy themselves on the visit, and making sure we get field passes and parking passes and all kinds of boring stuff like that. And that's kind of my job, is to make sure that the visit flows well and that people aren't thinking about anything other than coming and learning about West Point and having fun. The rest of the coaches do a lot more of the work of making sure guys show up excited to be on the visit, to be excited about West Point. My job is just to not screw it up and make sure it goes well and everybody gets there, and everybody has a good experience. So I do a lot more of the planning of the visit than the you know getting guys to come to post. I do a lot more of like making sure we get an academic meeting on the schedule, making sure we get to go play in the virtual range and have fun in there. Those kind of things are what I kind of do. And then obviously over the course of 4 years, I'm on a lot of the tours, getting to know the kids as they're visiting and their families, and so starting to make those connections as well. So they get to know me because some of them are going to spend a good amount of time with me once they get to West Point.
Have the recruiting visits, like what they do on their on visits, changed over the years? Like, if you guys like change things up, like as far as itinerary of like what they're doing on post, because you're like, oh, this is something new that's cool that we didn't have 2, 3, 4 years ago, or is it a lot of the same things and you're just kind of, recreating, showing West Point the way it's kind of been forever.
I think the answer kind of is both. There's a kind of a set template that makes sense and things you have to do. Yeah. If you didn't go to Trophy Point on your visit, did you even come to West Point? Right? Like you have to go to Trophy Point. That's a standard. You have to see Washington Hall. I think things that are probably kind of new wrinkles are like we had Friday night football 2 weeks ago. That's a new thing. So to have a night tailgate before a football game is a different experience than what had been traditional of an Army West Point visit. Most Army kickoffs are at noon, and by the time you get guys up from spending the night with their host and they come over and watch practice, it's time to go to the game. And it's time to be in the seats. You don't get that always that big, you know, Saturday football tailgate fill that you might get at other places. So Friday night football has been a big thing for us. Like that was an awesome experience last week, being able to have guys on a Friday night and spend a lot of time and see what the atmosphere was like. Sometimes it feels like a forced march on a Saturday morning. You get up, you go from the barracks to practice, and from practice up the hill and into the game, and it feels kind of rushed sometimes. So I think Friday night football is a big change, and then I think been a small, not like a giant transition, but a small transition from the things that Coach Ward liked to do on visits and Coach Nickerson liked to do. Where we're going to eat lunch with the families, and what type of interactions we're going to have with parents versus the cadet or the future cadets, the guys that are spending time with the cadets. So there's always like little tweaks that you're making. And in part, just so it doesn't get boring to the coaches too. Like if we did the same visit for 7 years, it's probably hard for us to be as enthusiastic about what things need to be and are at West Point if it's the same thing we've done for 7 years in a row. Right. So there's those little wrinkles, but there's always the big stuff. You got to meet with an academic advisor, got to go to the virtual range because it's like, I mean, you get to play real life Call of Duty. Like that's pretty freaking cool. You have to do that on the visit. Like it has to happen, has to get booked, right? And you gotta see what life's like on post. You gotta go spend time with cadets. Like if we didn't do that, we'd be doing guys a disservice because they gotta realize that we're not all robots and we have normal people on the team that just happen to choose a slightly different college lifestyle for, a better future down the road.
How
What's
often
the
sorry,
what's the standard for best restaurant right now?
Oh, so that's our favorite thing. We love having people in to Coach Nickerson's house, previously Coach Ward's house, right? Like that's a big staple. And in the recruiting meeting, we're arguing over who we're going to order from because like Coach Blyce is a big Hudson Taco guy. That's going to be his first vote is Hudson Taco in Cornwall. If you haven't heard Coach Green's beliefs on pizza, you should spend some time. There's a novel there.
Yeah,
So
I just
we'll
see
have a
the
debate on
Instagram posts.
whether we're gonna have pizza from Marinas or another local spot. Um, and again, being the boring logistics guy, I'm like, hey, who did the best job with delivery last time? Like whoever made it like smooth and like knocked it out of the park. That's who I want. Like I don't
Who
care what
showed
we're
up on
eating.
time? Yeah,
Yeah, is it on time and presented well? Like that's what I
yeah.
want to know about. So,
is
um,
Dong Fong ever part of the conversation?
what's that?
Is Dong Fong ever part of the conversation?
No, it has not been part of the conversation. Although it is kind of delicious. It's
It's
it's a
so
little
good.
it's a little bit slept on. You're a little bit nervous walking in there,
Yeah.
but it's pretty dang good.
I'm just kind of surprised to hear they're still open.
Oh,
Oh,
it's still
absolutely,
thriving.
going strong, going strong.
I
That's
always
funny.
try to bring in Dong Fong and at some point into every episode if we're talking about being at West Point or if it's not like about an away match or something like that. Um, but that's cool. The do they Is there a lot of thought that that goes into like where each of the recruits are going to stay, like which cadets they're matched with? Like, um, I'm sure hometowns probably play a factor in that, but like, is that very deliberate how you guys plan that?
As much as we can be deliberate. So I think there's two layers to it, right? We're thinking about the recruit and what's going to be most appealing to them, and that's usually somebody from their hometown or their home state, or someone that they're going to connect with. But there's also there's a piece of like, what do our guys have going on too? Like, if we can't put a guy on a visit with somebody that's got 7 WPRs that week, he's probably not going to be a real good host. He's got stuff to do, and is like, man, I want this dude to come here, but like, I would like to graduate from West Point. I got this stuff to do, right? So there's actually a component of that, of figuring out who's got the best time and the best personality and has some energy to host that weekend, as well as who's a good fit, right? And we kind of, I at least have kind of started to lean towards having our sophomore class take the lead on visits, right? If you're a plebe, you're still kind of learning how things work yourself, so you have a real fresh perspective, but like, you're still learning how to do things yourself. And if you're a firstie, this is now would be potentially your fourth year of doing visits. Like, you're probably a little less interested in guys that'll be, because we're recruiting so far ahead, you're probably a little less interested in getting someone that's going to not be at school until a year after you've graduated, interested in coming in West Point. So sophomore, junior class is probably our sweet spot as far as hosts. They have a real good perspective and understanding of how the program works and how West Point works. But they also haven't done this, 185 times, and they're a little bit closer to the age of the kid that they're going to be, that we are recruiting. So they can have a little bit more in common. Doesn't seem like that much would change in 5 years, but like, you've been at West Point for 5 years, you have probably a different perspective on life than a kid that's 16 years old, right? You have a little
Yeah.
less in common than you want to admit at that point in your life. So, but there's definitely a lot of thought that goes into it, but sometimes best laid plans doesn't always work out.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, the 23-year-old, first year that went to prep school is probably not the best to host, a freshly minted 16-year-old junior in high school.
Yeah.
Now I will say that we have some firsties that are absolute rock stars, and they're ambassadors for the program and have been ambassadors for the program for 4 years. They're good at understanding how to talk to recruits. They're very relatable. They're just really relatable people, period. So we certainly have those guys, but we try not to make them be the hosts in an overnight situation. Like, that's on our younger guys to figure out where everybody's going to sleep, and then we got our firsties above them to like help troubleshoot if anything needs done. If somebody doesn't have a bed, they help make sure that gets done.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, they're the older guys. Even if they're not hosting overnight, they're still around the recruits. So much. The whole team, being around them the whole weekend or a few days.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we talk about how when we talk about brotherhood all the time, right? Like, that we can't talk about brotherhood and then be like, well, our firsties are checked out over here, and our plebes are over here. Like that, our guys spend time together all the freaking time. They're
Yeah. I feel like when
so
I was like
just because
hosting, it
you're
was
the
like,
host doesn't even mean that's who you're hanging out with. I always tell the guys, like, that just means you're the one that's responsible. You're the host. The team hosts together, though.
yeah, I felt like we always tried to bring everybody around, like especially like get the recruits together. Even like they're gonna have their own individual time with you or whatever, but like let's get together as a group, go walk around, see different stuff. Like you can talk to people that are like you don't want to like isolate one guy necessarily. Like when especially if it's like a big visit or a big weekend where you got a bunch of guys in, it's like you want them to like interact with each other too. So there's always that different component to it.
Yeah. And again, our with our guys being so close, there's always kind of like, well, is this guy maybe a good host for this guy? And I was like, well, it kind of doesn't matter, because the next three guys beside him I know are awesome hosts, and that's his three best friends. So like
Yeah,
we're gonna be all
he's
right.
gonna fine. Yeah, it's fine.
We're gonna be all right. Even if this guy's
Yeah,
not a great social guy to talk to, his three best friends are, and I guess he's gonna be hanging out with his three best friends, so we're probably gonna be okay.
yeah.
So transitioning back to, 3 summers ago when you're, coming to West Point, talk to us about like kind of what that process was like. You were, you know, coaching for 15, 16 years before that after college and, a wide number of capacities. What was, I guess, how did this role come to be and what was attractive about it, for you and your family? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it honestly kind of came about out of nowhere. I was literally I've always had a good relationship with Scott. We go way back, and 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon over three different jobs I've had and he's had. Like we just go way back. And so when PJ Okunzanya, I thought made the U23 World Team that year, I was texting Scott to congratulate him about putting a guy on the team. Um, and then he told me PJ hadn't made the team because someone else had placed at senior nationals. And then I was like, oh, well, I just kind of started giving him some crap about, well, you probably should have figured that out ahead of time or something. I don't even remember. I was just kind of talking crap to Scott. And then out of the blue, he was like, actually, it's funny, like we actually might have a role for you here if you'd be interested. And my daughter was, she maybe one at that point, two. Yeah, probably two at that point. And my wife was upstairs putting her to bed. So Scott was like, do you have time for a call? So I called and talked to Scott for a handful of minutes. And then my wife came down the stairs and I was like, hey, so I might have just gotten a job offer to go coach at West Point. Like, are we considering that? And she was like immediate, like I was less sure than she was at that point. She was like, absolutely, you're freaking looking at a job at West Point. Like, we're going. So then a week or so later, I had a sit down interview with Coach Ward. We were both on the road in similar places recruiting at the time, so we sat down and got together and um, offered me the job. And I mean, from a wrestling perspective, it was always a slam dunk for me. I was a Division II head coach, and I loved coaching in Division II and in Division III. It wasn't like I had to be back in Division I, but to have an opportunity to be back in Division I with some people that I really respected, like there was only a handful of people that I really would be like, man, I want to work for them because it's kind of cool when you're a head coach and
Yeah.
you have a boss. There was a handful of people on the short list that I was like, I wouldn't mind working for those guys, and it would get me back in Division I. And two of them happened to be at West Point at the time, so that was what made it really appealing initially. Was really just that, like, man, I get a chance to coach with these guys and at this place. I think it's going to be really cool. And then we took a visit to West Point just to kind of get used to where we might be moving. And my wife fell in love with the statues and the monuments and the Hudson. She was a history major in college, so like she was pretty sold on West Point pretty quickly. Um, and so it just it all kind of fell into place. And then admittedly the first year was utter chaos. We moved twice. We were trying to find a place to live in the Hudson Valley is not always the easiest thing. So we moved twice. We moved right after EIWAs into the house that we're in now. Like first year was utter chaos, and I'm sure there was a couple of times where she was like, I'm not sure if I should have looked
Yeah.
at the Jefferson statue so much. Maybe this wasn't as cool as I thought. But after that, things settled in, and it's been awesome.
Were you like from pretty close to the area, or did you have like experience with West Point before that at all?
No, no, I was just as shocked as every one of our recruits is that people weren't marching around when I got there. Like I just assumed people carried a rock everywhere they went, and they marched everywhere they went. Um, I had no clue. I just knew they were getting better at wrestling every year. And it was a good opportunity. And then I got there and was like, oh, like everybody's kind of like the normal dude. They just wear a
Normal.
uniform to
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
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 Normal for wrestlers, right? That's a whole other conversation of like,
Yeah. It's like yeah, we're normal. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, um, that was kind of the initial thing. I just, man, I like these guys, and I like what the place stands for, and it's an opportunity. It was really that simple. And then I learned a ton the first year. I didn't know much at all about West Point. I started taking in acronyms left and right, trying to figure it out. And the best compliment anybody's given me. We had a recruit on post 2 weeks ago, and it was a dad had been lifetime military, and he was like, "How long have you been here?" I said, "Well, this is my fourth year." He goes, "You sound like you've been here 20 years. You actually know the lingo." And I was like, "Well, that's the best compliment anybody could give me. All this time
Yeah,
with the
that's
acronyms
great.
is paying off."
And you didn't have the benefit of Doug Williams sending you bugle notes like he did to Coach Nickerson
Yeah,
before you got in the seat.
great point.
I think in year three, Doug told me what bugle notes were, though. So I have seen. I know what you speak of.
No, so one would argue you're entering your first year this year, at West Point.
Yeah. Well, we'll say I'm not there yet. I would have had to go to the prep school, so I'm not there yet.
You're approaching full privileges. You're gonna.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, I guess I was gonna right before you answered that, I was gonna ask like, what was your exposure like before West Point? But like, like, is there anything this may you may have to think for a second for this, but like, is there anything that stuck out as like, wow, that's West Point is such a like weird things you see at West Point that you don't see at other places? Like, do you remember anything that sticks out? I always try to ask people that of like or just like something like really odd early on.
Well, this is kind of a common answer, but it was bizarre to me that we couldn't park anywhere near Arvin Gym. It had nothing to do with the military. Just
There's
I
just
was like,
never a
what
spot.
what do you mean I have to park at the rugby field every day? Like, what's going on? The fact that I couldn't park anywhere near the facility was probably the first like odd thing that jumped out to me. And then I was quickly educated that, West Point doesn't have a parking problem, that I had a walking problem. So that was really the issue. That was probably the first like really weird thing to me. And then short way, like partly through the year, just watching guys come in completely soaked with their full kit on coming out of the pool. And I'm like, what is going on right now? Like, did you guys just get ready? No, we were just swimming. We were in survival swim. Like,
And like they don't
no
have enough
big
time to
deal.
talk to
Like,
you
just
because they gotta go.
yeah, just another Tuesday,
Yeah,
soaked in our full kit. No big deal.
yeah.
Boots on the boot dryer. That was another one that got me too. We have a boot dryer in the wrestling room, and
That's
I
a
thought it was
luxury.
for wrestling shoes, but it turns out it's for boots after survival swim and also wrestling shoes.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of like not that we would know, but like putting on like a wet sauna suit. It's like it's like the same feeling of like being in your soaking wet clothes. It's just the worst. And then you have to put them back on and they haven't dried fully. It's like it's almost the exact same.
Yeah, yeah, that was probably the first like super kind of bizarre thing that I was like, but this is just normal. People have done this for hundreds of years. Okay, cool.
So, we talked in the beginning. Your role as the director of wrestling development. A lot. Uh, we haven't talked much about the prep school and your role there. I know that's a large part of it. And we don't spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about the prep school. We need to do more of that. That's a gap that I've realized, here, thought more about. Talk to us about like what your role is, with the prepsters. And I know, disclaimer for the listeners, we can't get specific with wrestlers because of compliance, and we'll get into that. We talked a little about it, before the show, and I was getting a little fired up. Um, but yeah, talk to us about the prep school a little bit and your role with the prepsters.
Yeah, so my official job title, right, is director of wrestling development. And so a little bit of a play on words. When I first got the job, I am a director of operations in kind of job task, like what I'm expected to do for the guys down the hill at West Point. Book travel, make sure things are right for for compliance, for recruiting weekends, all that kind of stuff. Probably can't even like think of all the stuff that I do for that, right? So I am in essence a director of operations. Um, but I said everybody's got a director of operations. We should have a director of wrestling development at West Point. And so that's kind of how the job title came around. I thought it was a kind of a funny play on words because the other half of my job, and probably the most important part, because other people could do what I do as a director of operations, the most important part is what I do at the West Point Wrestling Club. And so that's how I'm able to have interactions with our prepsters, with the guys on the varsity roster when they're going to U23s and U20s. And, fortunately, the last couple of years, world championships and things like that. I get to spend a ton of time with everybody on the roster through what I do with the West Point Wrestling Club. And so I help train the prepsters through that. And that's kind of my main thing. I travel with them whenever they compete. I'm there. We don't have a true use maps wrestling coach. If you were to like talk to the people at use maps, I was there for the better part of a year and I didn't exist on any directory. They didn't know who I was. I'm a volunteer at the prep school in essence. So I'm able to do what I do because of the West Point Wrestling Club. And I, in the most positive way possible, I think of myself as kind of a junior high coach, right? I have the guys for 1 year at the prep school, and my job, I tell people this all the time, my job is to try and replace somebody in the starting lineup every year. I may or may not be successful, but that's what my job is, to try and take somebody that's at the prep school and put them in the starting lineup when they're a plebe. That's what I'm trying to do. I've had a couple of years where I got pretty lucky and 3, 4, 5 guys found their way into the starting lineup coming from the prep school. It's going to keep getting harder and harder to do that. But that's essentially my job. And I love that role for 2 reasons. One, I get to run my own room, which is really cool. Like that was probably the thing that I was going to miss the most, not being a head coach anymore, was getting to run my own room. And my dad was a junior high coach for like 35 years. So when our high school team was good, I knew why our high school team was good. It was because our junior high program was good. It was because our youth program was good. And so I see myself a lot in that role. It's not the most glamorous thing, but I kind of can sit back, and when guys are doing well at NCAAs, those are almost like my babies. Like I got my baby boy to the show somehow, some way. Like I got him started, right? And so that's kind of how I've thought about it. My job at the prep school is try and put somebody in the starting lineup as a plebe, and then over the course of time, like my guys, even though they're all West Point guys and they're all my guys, like my guys have long-term success. And I was kind of the first step of that. That's the way I kind of think about it. And then when I get to go to U23s and coach everybody, then it's a bonus. U23s is kind of like my NCAAs, U20s and U23s. I don't get to sit in the corner at NCAAs, so U20s and U23s is my NCAAs.
I would think that's got to be pretty hard to like, each year detach yourself because like you're like so loyal to these guys and want to make them good. And then all of a sudden the next year, I don't mean it like, you forget about them, but like you're rooting for, hey, my job is to train these guys to beat these next guys. I would think that, now that you're about ready to start your 4th iteration, like it's got to get like a little bit hard. Like, man, like, I like these guys, but now I want these guys to beat these guys. And I've wanted these guys to beat all these guys. Does that make sense? Or like,
No, it makes sense. I mean, no, I there's two parts to this answer. So the first part is yes, it does get weird sometimes. We had a heck of a roster battle at heavyweight last year, right?
yeah,
I coached both of those guys at the prep school. I love both of them. I needed it sucked. It actually sucked for me as it was happening a little bit, but I also could sit back and be like super proud that like we had that good problem in the program because we had freshmen back-to-back years pushing to go to the NCAA tournament at that weight class, and at a weight class that for a little bit of time had been like a struggle for us. So that was really exciting. right? But it also was kind of like I needed to go give 2 or 3 sets of hugs at the EIWA tournament because I'm going to hug the guy that just made the tournament, and I'm going to hug the guy that didn't get a chance to be in the tournament because he didn't win the spot, and say, hey man, we got stuff to do this spring. This is what we need to do. This is where you. These are the things you're going to try and go accomplish. Like you're still super important here, right? So I had to. I mean, and not that the other coaches didn't do that by any means, but like that was something that like I felt, right?
Yeah.
I was excited, and then I was like, okay, I got to go see this guy too, right? And I hope that it continues to happen that way. As awkward as it feels sometimes, like that's what I'm supposed to do. And I'm not. It's not like I'm training people on a regular basis to like, hey, can you beat the guy in our roster? I'm trying to train them to beat guys at the NCAA tournament. And if they happen to pass somebody else in our own room, then so be it. It's not like there's a scouting report within our own room. It's just you got to go get better. If you happen to pass somebody up, that's kind of the point of the thing, right? You're supposed to get better. You're supposed to pass people up.
How involved are the AIs? When I was a kid, a prepster for a few years, the AI served as the prep school coach. Do they still, do the AIs, do they run practices or like have much involvement in, at the prep school these days?
So super involved. They don't run practice much, but that's kind of the function of the West Point Wrestling Club. We have people that can run practice now, so it's not their job to juggle having to teach an MCD class and put the TMP request in and go do the other thing that they get tasked to do as an AI, and then also make sure they're running a good practice for 6 months before they leave. Right? We're a little bit more of a permanent structure and unit, particularly at the prep school now, where there's people that can run the workouts day to day, and the AIs can be there. They travel, they coach, but they don't have to run the workout every day. And I think that's good for continuity and longevity. Again, and with an AI leaving in December or January every year, that's the person that ran the bulk of the workouts before they leave. You have like a break in continuity, and things get kind of jumbled and they don't connect well moving forward. So we try and make sure that they're involved. They're like super involved, but they're not necessarily running the room anymore. It's very, very different than 5 years ago, and particularly 10, 15 years ago, where there wasn't a continuity between the program. I kind of, and it's not about me, but just kind of, I touch every part of the program in some way. And we're able to kind of connect the dots in a better way than previous years when there was somebody there for a year and they left, or somebody there for 6 months and they left, which was like shocking. That was, you asked me what was a crazy thing. I didn't know that like in previous years before I got there and before other people had been on staff that like we used to just coach the prepsters until January and then they were kind of on their own. That was like the scariest thing I've ever heard, that we left 17 and 18-year-old boys that mostly to their own devices for like 4 months. That was super scary for me to hear.
The
Um,
I got a just question about their like this is just kind of like their daily schedules. Now I'm sure it's changed like over the process and like your involvement in terms of like is there overlap between like I know that they have training days or whatever like RTC days that they're allowed to be in the room. Um, but like what like do they practice at the prep school at the same time that they practice down the hill, or are you practicing at different times so you can kind of be in and out of both rooms, or what's that overlap look like for you?
So, with the exception of when there are RTC days and we're all together in Arvin, so like kind of throwing that out because that happens
Right.
on a fairly regular basis, but like with the that being the exception, um, the prep schedules not exactly the same, but almost identical to what you would see down the hill, right? So, prep school is an A hour, B hour, C hour, depending on whether you're on a day one, day two. So basically, you have 2 to 3 classes in the morning, um, go to lunch, have your 2 to 3 or 1 to 2 classes in the afternoon, and then you either have PE time or a break, and then you have at the prep school they still call it mass athletics. So your mass athletics time starts at 15:30 every day, and so that's when practice is 15:30 to hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. Go to dinner, go to ESP, rinse and repeat Monday through Friday. So it's similar in the way that things are structured down the hill. You're just taking less classes, right? You're going to be probably more in the 12 to 15 credit range if we were doing it by credit at the prep school versus, 15's a pretty light
Yeah.
semester down the hill, right?
Yeah.
So you're in that like 12 to 15 range. I mean, preps, math, science, English, military class, and then PE. Those are your classes. And they still do the built-in A day. So on a normal week, it's day one, day two, A day to study, day one, day two. So it's nice. They have a lot of built-in time to
Interesting.
study there.
What is A
Yeah,
day?
that is nice.
Who's that?
So it stands for academic day, and you actually don't really have classes either. You just have meetings with professors, additional study periods, things like that. So you do a day one class, a day two class, and then on a typical week, Wednesday's an A day. You have that day to study, meet with your professor, get caught up, get unconfused, whatever the case may be. And then you have a day one and a day two again.
And that's
And we
those
and we
A
get
days
to
are just
lift twice a week. PE is the lifting time for all of the sports at the prep school. So that is either a day one or a day two.
gotcha. Those A days they're not built in every week at West Point, right?
They don't exist. They don't exist at all at West Point anymore. They did still exist when I first got there. They were more like once a month, not once a week. But they've been removed from the schedule
You
for
say they did.
whatever
I don't recall
for
those.
whatever reason. You can hear, depending on who you ask, they can argue for their side, but they do not exist in the schedule anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah, the West Point or the prep school doesn't seem that much. And we didn't have science back then. It was just math and English. And it was like 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoon. One was math, one was English. And then like it was a fun
It
year.
sounds awful.
No, it
The
was fun.
classes are much shorter now. I can promise you
God,
that.
trying to focus for 2.5 hours. It's like,
Yeah,
ugh.
Oh no,
classes are
there'd be
much
like
shorter.
breaks and stuff, but it was like, I mean, I may be misremembering. This was like, over 20 years ago. But we only had math and English, and I remember it'd be like, one half of the day you're doing the one, then the other. But prep school is not a hard year. That was a fun year.
Yeah, it really is. It can be a lot of fun. It can also be a culture shock. We always talk about, because it's a quarter system, you're kind of like fighting for your life Q1 a little bit, because if it's quarter 6 weeks long, it takes you 3 weeks to understand what the heck you're doing, just in like life in general, not even
Yeah.
necessarily your studies. It's really no different than any other college. The difference is, all right, at 3 weeks, you're at midterms already. So Q1's always like the big learning curve. Q2, Q3, generally speaking, for whatever reason, wrestlers do great. It makes no sense because they're traveling the most then, and they're wrestling. And if they are cutting weight, they're cutting weight. Like all the things that should make it harder, they seem to thrive in. They do great in Q2 and Q3, and then Q4 you got to try and make sure they get to the finish line.
So things may have changed, but when I was there, I excelled in Q3. I was on the commandant's list, which people that know me, I'm not the guy that's on the
It's not a
commandant's.
thing. Yeah, not a thing. Huh?
The reason why you do well Q3 is so that you get all the extra privileges Q4. So if you like do really well, you're able to like have all these extra things, and you really want that to like, basically have after spring break, and like, all that. So that was my incentive for like really wanting to perform Q3.
So you just proved why Q4 is a fight for all of the coaches at the prep school because now everybody's got privileges they haven't had, and you've got to convince them that they should still be spending time studying while they have privileges. You
Yeah.
just you just answered the question.
Oh man. Man, I could ask like a million questions with prep school, but like when they announced first it was coming up to West Point, 15 years ago ish, um, I was like, well, it's got to be so hard because the prepsters have so much more privileges than the plebes. They almost had like firsty like privileges, and they'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, giving cars out to, uh, please and yucks, and there'd be all these inappropriate interactions. But it sounds like that never, not inappropriate, like just like letting people do things that they're not supposed to do. And then I come to find out like none of that stuff's happening at all. Like everybody's getting along. There's not really,
it it's really like two separate worlds. And I think it's designed to be that way. Like, I mean, to the letter of the law, it's supposed to be that way. I think just in how the culture works at West Point, it's supposed to be that way. Um, but I mean, it's its own self-contained unit with barracks and good mess hall and like everything's right there. You don't if you're not connected to another team, right? You don't really have a reason to ever need or want to be down the hill. So you don't really like your lives don't really ever mesh except for we have the regional training center. So there's that crossover. But if we didn't have that, like you could live at the prep school and just, never know that West Point existed if you didn't want to, other than
Yeah.
everybody shops at the same commissary.
yeah. Logan, you have any more topics on prep school before we kind of move on
Um,
to those things?
no, it's just I noticed that sometimes they can go to like football games and stuff. Do they have to buy tickets?
Typically, no, they can buy tickets, but typically, no. And there's usually a couple of events a year that are battalion wide, like everybody at the prep school's going. That's the
Okay.
date, and you're going. But typically, they can, between various different ways, unofficial visits, things like that. They have they have other friends that have tickets because they're local. A lot of kids at the
Yeah.
prep school, mom and dad are season ticket holders already. Like you don't have
Okay.
to buy
Yeah.
tickets. Like
Okay. That's it, Brian.
Um,
I don't.
so on that RTC note, some breaking news in the last couple days: the merger with the KD Training Center. And that exciting news come out. What can you talk about that, and how did that come to be, and like what's the future of that look like for the West Point Wrestling Club?
yeah, so I mean, I can talk on it a little bit. I'm probably not the most knowledgeable guy on the staff about the entire merger, so to speak. But it's just been kind of a continued relationship with KD over time. Our regional training center is super close to where he's been running his club for decade plus now. So there's been overlap with that, being at a lot of the same events. It's kind of built a little bit of a relationship. It was helpful for him for maybe some more of his more elite guys to come and get college level workouts as well. So that's where our regional training center kind of tied those pieces together. Um, and he's got a great club. I can't talk about the great kids that are in his club as we've already talked about. I can't say any PSA's names, but like he's got a great club. He's got great kids around, and so it made sense to kind of work together and join forces rather than being two completely separate entities. We can work together, and there's a lot of benefits in us being kind of within the same organization.
This might sound dumb. I'm just still not tied into the KD stands for what?
I'm gonna butcher Katie's name if I say Katie's name right now. Don't put me on the spot like that.
I
KD
don't
is
know. I mean,
KD's first and last name.
okay.
That's what KD is. But I'm gonna butcher his last name if I try it right now. You put me on the spot, I'm gonna blow it. So, but that's the KD training center. Started out, their main location was in Yonkers, and so, I mean, and I think it fills a gap too in what we're trying to provide as the West Point Wrestling Club. Like we do want to help local high school kids, but I also, just being honest, if I have a night off, I want to go to my daughter's wrestling practice too. Like I really want to help local high school wrestling, but I also want to help my daughter at wrestling practice if I can be there. Right. And so this helps fill a little bit of a void where KD is going to provide that high school, like that at large, not necessarily every kid that's in an RTC level of training in addition to high level training. And so that kind of fills a little bit of a void that West Point Wrestling Club was not necessarily struggling to do, but we probably weren't doing it as best we possibly could. Because like Coach Nickerson's job is to make NCAA All Americans. It's not to make the kid at the local high school qualify for the state tournament. As good as that feels, and as much as like, and it does, like a kid that comes to camp and then qualifies for the state tournament, like that feels cool. But like that's not our main job, right? And so that allows us to support that in the local community, but not have to put too much of our own brains and hearts into that. But we still provide a really good resource.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know if that's I know that there's some other like local high schools and stuff that get tied into RTCs. It's kind of the first evolution of this, it seems like through West Point at least.
Yeah, so I mean, and we're not getting into, not going to, because it's boring. I'm not going to go down to like, but there's a difference between a local sports club and being able to have a club organization versus a regional training center, and there's different criteria for both. So, I mean, long story short, a kid that doesn't have any freestyle credentials but is trying to, you know, improve as a high school wrestler didn't really have an outlet at a regional training center, but they have an
Right,
outlet at a club. And
right.
so that's kind of the idea behind it.
We we've had a couple episodes with Coach Nickerson, and I've focused so much on just like moving the area and learning and things like that. We've kind of overlooked the fact that there's a women's wrestling club that got approved over the last couple months at West Point. What was that process like? Were you involved in that? I'm sure you're obviously aware of it, but I'm not sure how close that is to you or to the program. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I would say I was a little bit involved. That's kind of my answer for everything. I'm not in charge of anything, but I'm a little bit involved in everything. Um, Vale Baker was probably the biggest driving force of there being a women's wrestling club at West Point. And now she's obviously enlisted and she's not still here at West Point, but she's, now in the WCAP program, and her time at West Point is what made her decide to enlist, right? But she was the biggest driving force behind it because every time there would be a no, Vale would just kind of take it with a smile. I don't know if you've like got to spend any time around her, but she's like the sweetest human being in the world. And she would just go, okay. And then she would go back with like the intensity of like nothing I've ever seen and figure out a way to turn that first no into a yes. And then the next no into a yes. And little by little, she had 20 girls coming in through the club every night that were West Point cadets, but they didn't have an official home, right? They weren't a sponsored club yet. They were just kind of doing this in their spare time, free time. And little by little it evolved where it was an unmet need at West Point where not only are there some women that were really good wrestlers in high school and they just didn't have the outlet at West Point, but also like think about the culture of West Point. Like a girls wrestling team just makes too much sense. We're not at the varsity level yet, and quite frankly, maybe that doesn't matter because there's a kind of a dividing line in women's wrestling where like what's more important, making a world team or winning an NCAA title, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just a real thing. And so maybe we have more people make a world team in the future We can't win an NCAA title because we're not an NCAA team, but we might have 2 or 3 people on the world team, and that sounds pretty cool. And then we've got some people making the transition into WCAP, and that's pretty cool. Like it was an unmet need, but I give Vale most of the credit, and then I give Sophia credit for keeping the ball rolling once Vale headed out. And there's a million other people like behind the scenes that could have said no and squashed it, and they spent time to make it happen. But those two were the driving force. If Vale was never at West Point, it wouldn't have happened. And if Sophia wouldn't have had the success that she's having, it never would have happened. And now we have Claire Bowie on the roster because of what they did during their time at West Point as West Point Wrestling Club athletes, not even as coaches. They weren't official staff members. So that's kind of how that evolved. Again, like it probably someday could be its own book of all the like hoops that people jump through just for it to be at club status. But it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you speak to like the world titles versus NCAA titles, like and I'm not that in tuned with like what the goals are of of high school girls, but I feel like there's so much look toward, and the girls are so good now that like the look is like towards world titles and such a freestyle focus that I feel like you'd have a lot of young girls that are like want to go to West Point and they're like, I'm bypassing college wrestling to just focus on that, and like because I want to be in WCAP later on. This is a way for me to get a degree from West Point, and I'm the way the guys think of it, where like hey, the goal is win an NCAA title, and like yeah, great, I can go and compete in WCAP and do that in freestyle, but you almost get to like just focus right away on freestyle the way the girls program is set up. So I never really thought about that until you started talking about it, but that's a great recruiting tool. If I'm sure Scott's thought about this years ago, and he's already, taken advantage of this, and that's what he's working on to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
I probably didn't give Scott enough credit for making sure Vale was here. Like this was probably a thought in Scott's brain 20 years ago, and it's just now coming
Yeah.
to fruition. But I like to give Vale the credit because she was kind of like she was the poster child and led the way. But yeah, no, absolutely. World championships is what high level girls are thinking about. Fargo's the thing that they're thinking about for the most part in high school. There are still a lot of states that have folk style wrestling. Um, but most are making the transition to like freestyle is what they're training, and that's what matters because that's what they're going to wrestle in college. And if you're going to wrestle freestyle in college, probably the most important thing you can do is focus on making world teams, not necessarily winning the NCAA. Right? We
Right.
wrestle folk style in on the men's side, so we focus on winning NCAA titles, and then we start thinking about world titles. So it's a little bit of a different mindset. And again, one of those things that like we're super excited about, but we have to like take a step back from time to time and remember like, oh yeah, our job, make sure we put people on the podium at NCAAs. Like I could spend I could spend days and weeks training Claire Bowie. I was just joking today with someone that was working out with her. I said, she might take you to the Olympics someday. Don't worry about it. You know? And I could go way down that rabbit hole, but that's not my main job is to make our main job is to make sure NCAA All Americans, NCAA champions, and our guys are graduating from West Point.
What year is Claire?
She's just a plebe. She went to she actually, so this is an interesting story too. She is if she wasn't at West Point, she would be a sophomore. She was an NCAA finalist, or NCWA finalist. I can't remember which division she was in at King, but she went to King, which is a small Division II school, and crushed it as an athlete her freshman year. But as things were starting to develop and she realized there was going to be an outlet for her at West Point, she wanted to go to West Point all along. She wanted that education. She wanted that opportunity, but the wrestling piece of her life didn't fit West Point at the time. The opportunity wasn't there for anybody still in college. All our West Point Wrestling Club athletes were graduated. once that became an option with the club on the horizon, she decided she wanted to be at West Point. And so, and and I don't know the ins and outs of like how she became a rostered athlete, but I can tell you she deserves every bit of being a rostered athlete. She's tough. She won the combatives that they do during Beast. She like record time champion on the women's side. Just crushed
That's
everybody.
not
Like
fair. Yeah, I mean, that's
just crushed everyone. Like
that's. I hope there's some video footage of that floating around. Coach Nickerson was telling me a little bit about it. A couple weekends ago, about her being on the roster and things like that. But I'll ask him, on the show next time to kind of go into that because that's a cool process. And there's a lot of alumni that that listen that have daughters that wrestle that are super high on like getting a program to West Point and women and growing women's wrestling. So it's definitely a growing topic, and I want to keep it talking about it so it doesn't get forgotten about. At least,
yeah, I would love it to reach NCAA status at some point because that would certainly allow us to kind of give them a lot of the same benefits in the recruiting process that our guys get. But I'm also not going to be not grateful for what we have with the West Point Wrestling Club now, and then being able to be like, an actual sanctioned club within West Point.
yeah. Well, we're almost hitting an hour right now. I did want to hit on, what the prep school schedule looks like a little bit this year in the fall, leading into the season. I'd like to talk prep school, again, maybe closer to after the season starts a little bit, and you know, I know we can't talk about individual guys, but we can talk about some things more and the progression and stuff like that. But yeah, if you could let the listeners like what the schedule is like this year, is that out yet?
It's out in the essence that it exists on a spreadsheet somewhere. The great irony of a prep schedule for all of the academies, honestly, is you can make whatever plan you want, and that's awesome because you can make whatever plan you want, but there's like nothing tying anybody to that plan. So someone could call tomorrow and be like, "Yeah, we actually don't want to wrestle you guys." Or we could magically get uninvited from something that we're invited to because it doesn't help fit the Division 1 qualifying model, right? Like you don't get any doesn't
Yeah.
help you to be a kid from prep school, right? That doesn't really do anything for you for your NCAA qualifying. So that's your big long caveat to we think the prep school's going to the Princeton Open. They have a dual meet on the horizon with Fairmont State, which is a Division 2 school in West Virginia. Division 3 Open WNJ invite that same week. Prep always goes to something called the New York State Open. You guys might have actually wrestled in the New York State Open
Yeah,
back because it used to be like a banger when everybody went. Now it's
it was
mostly
all the like Division 1 and Division 2 schools I think at the time.
yep,
Pretty much
yep,
everybody but Cornell sent
yeah,
like their A squad.
yeah.
They were
So
sending
yeah,
A guys when I was there.
Really? I don't remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember Cornell ever really being there.
well,
it,
very very different event in that sense. Now there's occasionally some Division 1 athletes at it, but it's mostly the Division 3 schools in New York, and and prep almost always goes. So we'll have that, and then I skipped. There's an event called the Army Open this year. We've added the Army Open in the week before the Black Knight invite. So prep school will go to the Army Open. Be nice. They can just drive down the hill instead of having to drive all over the country somewhere that weekend. Um, and then the big one, they'll hit Wilkes Open before Christmas, and then Soldier Salute is on the horizon for this year too. So
Oh, nice.
those are those are the really big ones, and then honestly, the back half of January, February, March is there's definitely some things on the schedule, but like those are the things that are most likely to change over the course of the year because
was
it's
gonna say the Wilkes Open's like pretty big right now. Like, isn't it kind of like a giant tournament now?
Well, it's a little less giant than it used. Like in the 80s
Yeah,
and 90s, like East Stroudsburg and Wilkes were like, if you placed at those, you were like a certified hammer. Now it's a
Yeah.
little less, but it's a big tournament in that there's still a lot of entries. And it's like prep guys wrestled, I think every guy on the Appalachian State roster at the Wilkes Open last year. Like
Oh
maybe
wow.
every guy. It felt like every guy on the App State roster was there last year. So it is a good mix. There's some good Division One teams that go to Wilkes. We took the backups from the team down the hill a couple of years ago to get some matches at Wilkes. So it's a nice mix. That F&M Open is always on the schedule for prep.
Yep.
Um, and then February and March we always manage to figure out how prep can do some things then, but it gets tougher. There's less opens, there's less things to go to, and the focus usually switches to like getting ready for U20s. And Greco and freestyle, depending on what your skill set is.
gotcha. Well, Coach, I appreciate you coming on. And it's been long overdue. Yeah, we'll have you on here again, in a few months to kind of go through some other things. I'm sure we'll get, listeners out there, let us know, what questions, topics you want to know. Cause as you saw, as you learned, Coach Breeze is, he's got a piece in every task that's going on. So, he knows what's going on up there. But, anything else, Logan, before we close down?
No, just say thanks to you, Coach. I mean, it's awesome to kind of get to learn all the back end of stuff and kind of see what you have your hands in, which is almost everything. So cool, and just get to hear from you is good. I think we got to utilize you a little bit more on this show. I think we get all the dirt from Coach Breeze. So
That might be dangerous. I may not be allowed on ever again if I'm giving away all the dirt. I don't know. That could be
I don't know if
bad.
anybody will listen to it anyway. So.
Yeah, no, guys, I appreciate it. I just the only thing I'll plug this, and I know every time somebody talks, it always seems like somebody's asking for money, but I don't think people within the program, no matter what year you graduated, I don't think people still fully grasp how much the West Point Wrestling Club does to drive things forward. It's supposed to be separate, where Army West Point Wrestling's over here and West Point Wrestling Club is on the other side. But the 7 out of 10 dual meet victories against Navy last year, West Point Wrestling Club had a whole heck of a lot to do with winning 7 of those bouts and guys going to the NCAA tournament. So don't stop supporting Army West Point Wrestling and Army West Point as a whole, but don't forget about the West Point Wrestling Club, because I think that's probably been one of the biggest driving forces to our success in the last decade is the continued growth of that. And we're still not close to being the biggest, most well-funded club out there, but what we are doing with what we've got, it's been pretty important, I think. So that's my plug and my pitch. And then, I won't ask anybody for money the next time I come on.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you coming on, Coach Breeze. BHAW.
Yep. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, Coach.
Thanks for tuning in to the BHAW Radio Show. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. If there's something you'd like to hear on a future show, reach out to us on any of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Or you can reach us at email, bhaw.radio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, go Army, be Navy.